And we back. Fake microphone and all. I tried to get my husband to hook it up for me, but he was busy. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, make sure to watch the video before this for some context. That is going to be how to create your own workouts introduction, which goes over the entire series and what to expect. And hello, I'm Kelsey Nanini, certified strength and conditioning specialist and certified nutritionist. I'm here to help you go from frequent gym goer to strong, confident, educated athlete. And that's why today, in this video, we are going to cover the first principle of program design, needs analysis. Needs analysis is split into two parts. We have the requirements or the characteristics of the sport or the goal that you are trying to achieve. And we have the assessment of yourself, the athlete, or your client. So first, we're going to dive into the requirements or the characteristics of the sport or the goal. And there are a few things that we're going to need to know here in order to get the overall context of this specific need. We need the physiological or the biomechanical demands, common injuries that occur, and the position-specific needs if applicable. This, for instance, would be if you were or yourself are a football player and you think about the different positions in football. For instance, a lineman is going to be training a whole lot different than a receiver or a quarterback or even a kicker. Different positions will require different needs and adaptations. And so in order to reach that certain stimulus, they aren't all going to train the same. In fact, it's going to be very much so different. Now, we do this by an analysis of three different things. We're going to look at the movement, so the movement patterns, the muscles involved. We're going to look at it from a physiological standpoint, whether strength, hypertrophy, power, or endurance type training is necessary, or maybe a combination of a couple. And again, the injuries. So what common joints and muscles are overused and easily injured when we are training for this specific sport or goal. Let's use, for example, you have the goal of gaining lower body strength. You aren't competing in a sport any longer. You just want to grow some thick ass thighs, a huge ass, or you really just want to get stronger in this area. Maybe you have a huge upper body and you want to even it out with a huge lower body. In terms of that first point, the movement analysis, we have to think about what types of movements are going to be required in order to grow your lower body. This is going to be things like a squat, a hinge, a lunge, some pushing like in a leg press, even some pulling like in an RDL or in a hip thrust. Even bridges would be an example as well. So those are kind of the movement patterns that we're typically going to stick to when we're thinking about lower body. The next need is the physiological need. So we're thinking about growing a muscle that is hypertrophy. But in addition to this, let's say that in growing your lower body, you also just want to get stronger overall in your lower body. Then we're going to be wanting to work on strength as well. With this specific example of growth, power can be necessary and can be used because essentially strength is powerful movements at a heavy load. So we could implement in some power here, but least important is going to be endurance. We don't need an ultra high volume of training, and we also don't need a whole lot of stamina when we are talking specifically about muscle growth. Now that we have taken care of the characteristics and the requirements of the sport and or goal, we want to talk about the assessment of you or your client. This includes things like your current training, your history within training and or injuries, determining your primary goal, and potentially testing. So within athletes, there's tons of different testing. There's agility testing, strength testing, aerobic testing. If it's not an athlete, then maybe we want to do more of like a strength testing here. And then we want to evaluate those test results. Going back to that lower body goal, testing and knowing where your lower body strength is at is super, super important. Not only do we probably want to measure the circumference of your legs, the circumference of your glutes, your hips, but in order to measure strength gains, we don't want to just go by, I feel stronger. You want to get stronger. You want to also grow your legs. So we need specific data in order to measure whether or not you're reaching that goal. What we would do here is a 1 rep max or maybe a multiple rep max testing. And later on in this series, we are actually going to cover 1 rep max testing, but right now isn't really the time and place. Just know that in order for needs analysis to happen, we're probably going to want to test you and or your client. And then in order to test current training status, we're going to use this table from the Essentials of Strength Training and Conditioning. This is going to classify where you currently are, and it will be important to know where we need to start and how we are going to progress. That about sums up needs analysis, which is essentially getting a better understanding of where you or your client is currently at. This is going to be super important, as I said earlier, of knowing where we are starting at and knowing how we are going to progress in the timeline of this goal. Getting an idea of this is going to greatly help in not only the confidence of you building this program and your client or yourself enjoying it and actually seeing results from it, but arguably more importantly, it's going to help reduce the risk of injury. Now, you can't completely eliminate injury risk, but there are steps we can take to reducing the risk. And as we go through this series, I'm going to dive deeper into different ways that we can do so. Hopefully by now you feel a little bit more confident in what is involved in needs analysis. Now you can click here. We're gonna go over exercise selection.